Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third episode in our property series. Today, we're going to be discussing maximizing your property, specifically with getting maximum rental income and getting a maximum sale price if you're in the sales market. With me today is Andrew Walker of SA Property Investors Network, otherwise known as SAPN. Thanks for being here today.
Pleasure, and thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. And also with us again is Silna Steyn, Managing Director of SSLR Incorporated. Thanks for coming back and seeing us again, Silna.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me again. I'm always surprised if you invite me back. I'm like, yay!
You're here for the whole series.
Okay, so I should stop being surprised.
Stop being surprised, absolutely. Also with us in studio today is TPN Legal Counsel Rowan Terry. He's going to be on the Q&A and on the YouTube channel. If you have any questions, please ask them in the YouTube chat. He will be answering them and also providing them to us in studio. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Don't forget to log into YouTube. That way you can participate in that chat. Also, if we are looking a little bit blurry to you this morning, please click on the cog in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen and select at least 720p resolution or higher. That way you'll be able to see all of our faces. Also, feedback forms will be posted during the Q&A session, which will be in the final 15 minutes of today's session. Please fill out that feedback form, let us know what other topics you'd like to hear in future, and give us feedback on how we did. So getting on to the topic today, we're going to be talking about maximizing your rental value. And the entire property series that we've been doing has been focused on practical tips. So we're going to get really into the practicalities of what people at home, what investors and landlords can do to really up their values that they have. So first of all, Andrew, SAPN, tell me a little bit about what you guys do, who you are.
Sure. So SAPN is a network of property investors across the country, because one thing I realized, Greg, property is all about people. It's who you know. It's where you find the deals, where you find the cash, and where you get the support. So I started SAPN a number of years ago back in Edenvale, and we're a national company now where we support investors. When people get into property investment, it's a very lonely game if you try to do it by yourself. And so that's why we created the support and the network. So we run events, Greg, across the country, both live and hybrid. We work with you guys at TPN, Lightstone, various attorneys, Absa Bank, property inspection. So we bring all the power team members into one room to support that investor. And essentially that's what we do, Greg. It's networking, it's support, and a very big element is the education, because people want to get into development or student accommodation or multi-let or buy-to-let. And we all know, Greg and Silna, that you can make lots of money in property, but you can lose lots of money in property.
You can lose a lot of money in property as well.
Absolutely. And so that's why we take an individual, whether you're buying your very first property or an experienced investor, and we help them get to the next level.
That's great. So, okay, let's pretend that I know absolutely nothing and I'm looking to do the absolute basics with my property. It's before I've even put it on the market to rent. Let's just go with a rental as an example. What are the basics that I need to look at in my property practically in terms of maintenance, or what I need to do before I put my property
before you rent it?
Before I put it on the market,
So, first thing you must remember is that first impression always lasts. When you get to the property, so you've just bought the property, walk across the road and look at the property and put yourself in the shoes of a young family or a tenant. First of all, know who you're renting to. Are you renting to students? Are you renting to young professionals? Are you renting to families? And stand and look at the property and try to put yourself in the shoes of that tenant. Because you might have a beautiful house inside, a lovely kitchen, bathroom, but you're standing outside the property and it hasn't been painted, the gate motor doesn't work, there's rubbish bags everywhere. So even though the property itself is beautiful, first impression, whether you're selling or you want to rent a property, you've got to make sure that the curb appeal is there. So make sure the grass has been cut, make sure that wall's been painted, make sure the gate motor. So the outside and inside are equally important, but people see the outside first. So if you're renting your property, as you walk in the property, it must have a fresh lick of paint, right? So that even if you were reletting and the tenants moved out, it's not expensive to paint a property. Make sure there's no cracks on the tiles. Again, it's first impression. People walk in and you want to give the wow factor. In fact, your goal as an investor, when they open the door, that tenant must go, that's the property I want, right? Because they've fallen in love with the property. And it's small stuff that I do. If the property has no furniture in it, I go buy some nice red and blue mugs and I dress the property up. In the kitchen, I go buy the tea, the coffee, the little milk jar. I put coffee on because it smells nice. right? So
We'll
people walking go,
definitely get to the
wow,
stage.
the smell, the look, and the feel, and that doesn't cost a lot. You go to B&Q, Builder's Warehouse, you spend a few $100 or a few $1,000, but you can pick it up and put it into the next property.
Yeah.
So just, if I had to summarize that, put yourself in the eyes or the feet of the type of tenant, know who your tenant is, and then make sure the curb appeal is there, and as you open the door, the smell and the look, and things like damp, you know.
Yes.
If I walk into, and damp's quite a common thing, and you walk in, it's got a fresh lick of paint, but now all the paint is peeling, it's going to put people off.
Or you have that smell, you can sort of smell
It's
that
a
little
musty smell.
damp, musty smell as you walk into a
Yeah.
property. You want to
And
avoid.
put some air fresheners in. I mean, what does it cost to put air fresheners in every room? So as you're
Yes.
walking through, it smells nice.
But not the toilet spray one, guys. Don't let the place smell like toilet spray, okay?
Don't stand the goats.
Look at me being concerned.
Yeah.
So then I think a lot of investors and sometimes fall into a bit of a trap with something that's purely cosmetic in terms of things that are maintenance that's done, and something that actually adds real value.
Yeah.
So let's say from a sales perspective now,
Sure.
you know, having saying, you know, putting an extra lick of paint, but then all of your door frames are now an inch
Yeah.
thick and that sort of thing. What do we need to look at in terms of actual value add versus just cosmetic for the sake of it?
Sure. For me, your kitchens and bathrooms are very important. We spend a lot of time in the kitchen. So, yes, the door frames, I might give it a lick of paint, and it might not be 100%, but people can overlook that kind of thing sometimes.
Yes.
But you got to make sure that the kitchen's modern, it's in good condition. Because even for myself personally, you know, and a lot of people, and yourself as well. So if you walk in and the walls are pristine, the door frames are great, and the floor, but you got this cupboard that's 1910, some of the doors are falling over. I was like, you know what? I can't be bothered in putting a new kitchen in. So I've always taught from the beginning, I was taught as well, make sure the kitchen and the bathrooms are 110% because people can then overlook the small things in the property. What do you think, Silna?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Luckily, 70s are clearly coming back. So maybe those fabulous burnt orange and the greens and the stuff, and that might be back. I'm not saying leave your bathroom like that,
Yeah,
but exactly
exactly.
that. What I've seen on that one, overspending on a property, is very often the mistake investors make is to put themselves almost too deeply in the shoes of the purchaser or the tenant. Sometimes you get a situation where the property is a bit not dilapidated but old and worn. On the other hand, you awesomenize the property. That's a word, that's a legal term.
Awesomenize.
Awesomenize. But the thing is, you put in the Tivoli tabs and all, I'm not sorry, Ella. But you put in all the Lani things and your fittings end up costing so much. Where it's a rental, we need to appreciate that a working tab that is going to last longer is probably in a rental property worth much more. Where if you want to sell, gorgeousness is probably even more important. So it depends, right?
No, it does.
On what you're going to do with it.
If you take an area like Hillbrow as an example, I'm not going to go put gold taps in. But if I go to a very lardy place in Santon or Bryanston or Morningside, I am going to put a gold tap in because that's what the market dictates. That's what the market wants. So like I said earlier, whether I'm going to rent a property or I'm going to sell a property, who am I selling to? If I'm doing a little one-bedroom flats in Primrose in the East Rand, I'm going to spend 15,000, 20,000 on the kitchen. That same size flats, I pick it up into Santon, I'm probably going to spend 150,000 on the kitchen as an example. So know where the property is. You must never dictate what that property is going to look like. You have to ask the market. Market, what do you expect from this property, and you give them what they want.
Also, just a practical example of, for example, someone getting a bit of tunnel vision with overspending. I went to go and look at a property, and when I went into the kitchen, it was absolutely pristine, completely brand new. All of the cupboards were spotless, everything was new oven, everything was great. But they'd obviously got tunnel vision in putting their cupboards in, didn't leave any under counter space at all for any appliances. So I walked in, thought I have a washing machine and a dishwasher. This is straight back out the property. So you've got to be very careful with the work that you do and the maintenance that you do, that you're thinking very practically in terms of what is the person that's coming in here going to need, what is my property, what my appliances might they have I left spot for the basics.
Definitely.
But what's your opinion while I'm hijacking your question now.
No problem.
If we look at, we have load shedding again. I don't know if you guys knew this. I was so surprised last night. I didn't know if the power went off. I'm like, I wasn't ready. I had to blow dry my hair for today. But luckily, when you were in here, we made a plan. But Now, what's the opinion on solar things? Or for instance, a gas oven. Is it worth installing something like a hybrid stove, for instance?
Definitely go gas for stoves. All my rental properties, most of our investors are going that route now. For cost as well as a problem as well. So at least the power goes off, your tenant's got a gas cooker that can still cook food for the kids.
Geyser?
So I've gone gas geysers, I was electrical, I've also gone gas, and I'm finding a lot of our investors are going down that road as well. And the word solar is coming in very big. In fact, Investor of the Year, we've got a green category now because a lot of our investors are going down that road. Energy efficient, saving on power, all of that. So it's becoming very popular.
Does it increase your rent? So for instance, if say you're a tenant, I would probably pay a bit more. For my office, I pay.
I would say it's probably not
for
a huge amount, but it is probably a consideration. It's probably the sort of thing that if you're looking at two properties and you think, oh, but that one's got solar and that one's got electric, maybe I'll be leaning a little bit further if I'm looking at the same rental amount.
I'll pay a bit more for a warm bath, I won't lie, and a cup of tea.
Although if you think about not just in the major metros, but a little bit further out where even you have your load shedding, but your electricity supply is a little bit more wary. You look at properties that have their own generator boxes or their own JoJo tanks installed. So if you're not necessarily in a major metro as well, you can look at additional things
the
like
benefits,
that.
Right?
Yeah, benefits.
Yeah.
I think we had a question. Rowan was waving a hand at me.
So we actually did a poll and we asked all of our viewers, are you optimistic about the residential property market? 8% said no, 11% said not sure, and 80% said yes.
That's great.
So I think that's
I
really
agree with
fantastic.
Well, look, at the end of the day, everyone needs a place to live. Yes, people are struggling financially. Prices are going up.
Yeah.
But the demand is still there and everyone needs a place to live. Us as landlords and investors just need to set the right price for rentals for our properties, look after our tenants, and understand that people are going to go through a tough time.
Yeah.
And same as COVID, and we've just got to manage that. But at the end of the day, the residential market is not going anywhere.
Oh, that poll gave me goosebumps. Thank you, guys.
That's a very nice way of looking at it. Silna, whilst we're on the sort of topic of maintenance, there's a lot of differences obviously between doing a freestanding property and doing a body corporate when you're dealing with maintenance. When you're dealing with a body corporate, there's obviously a couple of extra steps in dealing with maintenance. Maybe when we're dealing with outside versus inside, can you just give us a little bit of a rundown of body corporates and what the extra steps you need to take are?
Yes, definitely. So the thing about a body corporate, and it's not a freestanding property that you can do as you see fit. Obviously, your management rules and your conduct rules will play into that. So if you have, say for instance, you have a property in a sectional title complex, a face brick property. You can't just decide, you know what, I don't like face brick anymore. Also, nobody ever thought that, but just bear with my example. But I can't deal with this. I'm just going to get somebody in and plaster and paint it a nice little pastel pink. Ne? I mean, it's going to be a problem, and you're going to be limited to what you can do, the type of maintenance that you can do. Typically, the rule of outside body corporate, inside owner isn't as simple as that, because your geyser, for instance, in some body corporates, it will be covered by the body corporate insurance, in some instances not. So I'm always very reluctant to have a one-size-fits-all rule.
Definitely.
You've heard me on rentals a million times. I always say, I won't say the gate motor is landlord responsibility, where, you know, the light bulb is tenant responsibility. Things aren't as simple as that. So it depends on the specific body corporate. It depends on the specific thing. So say, for instance, you have to do maintenance to a property in a sectional title complex, a completely outside thing. Let's say a garden.
Yes.
So you have a little swimming pool. Now it's outside, but it could be an exclusive use area, which means now it's still your responsibility. So I think the easy answer is actually the slightly more homeworky answer would be go to your conduct rules, go to your management rules, and really understand it. I've seen so many investors buy properties into sectional title. They think they're going to do this and that. They're going to plaster this face brick, and it blows up because they can't.
So and a common one in that, Solna and Greg, is Airbnb. Airbnb is a very popular strategy, right?
Yes.
It's a good cash flow strategy, but they go into the complex, and you know what the body corporate says? Yes. So they buy it, and the body corporate then changes because it becomes a mission for the security.
Now your
and
conduct rules are
and
changed.
there's big parties happening. The body corporate says, sorry, 6 months down the line, but we will no longer allow the Airbnb in this complex. What do you then do as an investor? So be very careful. I've also spoken to an investor. The agent said, it was in Santon, yes, we can rent the property out as Airbnb. The agent said it. The investor didn't check with the body corporate rules. 1.6 million rand for a little flat, bought the property, wanted to do Airbnb, and
immediately
very found out it's going, sorry, but you cannot do it. So check the body corporate rules all the time.
Yeah, body corporate rules, they often refer primarily to something called harmonious appearance. So you need to often look exactly like your neighbor. And something that I think a lot of people neglect to realize is that also includes things like aircon. So your aircon in your property, some body corporates don't allow aircon at all. So you can't have a big aircon unit on the side of the property. So you really do have to do your homework and make sure you've gone through those rules and you've had a good look, because, you know, if you're in the Durban summer and your complex doesn't allow you to have an aircon, you know, it might not be something that your tenants want to stay in.
And another place where one of our investors got stunk still, no? So your levies were, I don't know, 1,000 Rand a month. Didn't ask the question, are there any special levies coming up? It went to something like 3,000, only for about 8 months or something.
But still.
But just ask the body corporate, are there any special levies coming, because it's compulsory, right?
Yes.
Sure.
And the thing is, get the minutes of the last 2 or 3 years AGMs. Get a bit of a vibe of what's going on, because especially as an investor, you want to be at the AGMs every single time. You have to. It's your job. That's your one job. But if you see in the minutes, every time Tannie Cookie lost it and she grabbed it will be Tannie Cookie, sorry Tannie Cookie, but she will be grabbing the chairperson, you know, by his collar and say, no, you don't want to buy into a place like this. This is part of your due diligence, as much as you get somebody out to check if there isn't termites and check if stuff isn't rotting. Make sure you're buying into a body corporate where you can actually have proper AGMs without shouting and killing each other.
And as you say, with something like the geyser, which might necessarily be on common property, might be in your own section, it's very important that you go and get a copy of your sectional plan. So that you know exactly where your outline and boundaries stand. So, you know, if there's something that's going to be a body corporate expense, like the geyser, you know, either I need to get some insurance going or I can rely on the body corporate's insurance. And we were sort of having a bit of a discussion beforehand about insurance. So one question that's been popping up a lot in the industry, and I'll let Silna take you through it, is regarding who can actually contact insurance. Do you want to?
Yes, it's a very interesting topic. If you have a sectional title complex, you have a body corporate, and there's insurance, but the managing agent was the one arranging it. So you have a managing agent, you have a body corporate that's obviously managed by them, and then you also have the owners in the property. There's an issue. Who can submit that claim to the insurance of the body corporate? Now, there is actually quite a few managing agents out there that says only the managing agent is allowed to submit those claims to the insurance. And it makes absolutely no sense. Remember, the managing agent is the one that, you know, the debit order is probably going to run from their account. True story. But what are they getting? Where are they getting the money to pay that? From your levy. And your levy includes your insurance. The body corporate isn't a separate entity. Every single owner of the in the complex is part of this body corporate, so you are more than welcome to do that. But I say this, I have to say specifically, it depends on your policy document. So have a look at the policy schedule. Who is the person responsible? Who can talk to the,
again, it's also
to the insurer?
It's very important though that you don't also just jump straight to going and doing the claim. If you can work with your body corporate, if you can maintain that good relationship with the body corporate, it's only going to serve you in the long run.
And your managing agent, a good relationship with your managing agent. Sometimes you're going to have to bite your lip, but sometimes lip biting is completely worth it.
So, as an example there, you're saying earlier about the geyser as an example. In some body corporates or complexes, it's the landlord, the owner's responsibility, and then in some cases, the body corporate. Would that dictate who submits the claim? So if it is in a complex, I'm living there, and in the body corporate rules it says I'm responsible, will I then submit that claim?
It will depend on who has the insurable interest. So exactly that. Say, for instance, the management rule says Usually, the body corporate will come and do maintenance every 5 years.
Yeah.
But insurance responsibility remains with the owner. That would be a weird thing, but I mean,
Yeah.
anything is possible. I've seen weird things. That's why I'm saying it won't be a one size fits all
Sure,
thing.
yeah.
But in all instances, say the geyser is body corporate responsibility. But if that geyser bursts, it's going to create a problem for the landlord. Look at me now, for the owner and potentially landlord. And then that person must be allowed to have access to have that repaired
Yes.
immediately to mitigate his damages.
Exactly.
Because remember, we have a legal obligation to mitigate damages.
Definitely. Okay.
Exactly. So also on the topic of maintenance a little bit, let's say you've got a tenant in your property. What are the steps to take with dealing with your tenant if you want to do, let's say, it's very different when your geyser bursts and you suddenly have to do emergency repairs versus you want to make renovations when you've got a tenant. It's a very, very tricky line to walk.
And renovations, Greg, this is a good question because renovations aren't created equal. We have some people
Absolutely.
that doesn't want to renovate by, putting up a new afdak or something, by renovating they mean building a granny flat or building a completely different room. Now,
Tearing up the entire kitchen.
Exactly. The rental housing act does deal with this. So in residential property, it does deal with that. Necessary repairs and renovations, the landlord must give proper notice before they go in to commence those maintenance work or repair work or whatever. But if it's not really necessary, I always say to a landlord, just sit tight a little. Just wait for this lease to run out. You can then do one of two things. Either when that tenant vacates, you have all the time in the world to renovate your heart out. You can break down, you can build.
Yeah.
You have an obligation as a landlord to provide the tenant with undisturbed use and enjoyment of the premises. So yes, maintenance is all good and well, and a landlord must do that, but we need to be able to draw a line here. What is fair and what is reasonable? To come in and do a coat of paint, suddenly in the middle of a 2-year lease agreement, you had time to paint before.
Yeah.
Why are we now suddenly inconveniencing the tenant by painting? So I usually see this obviously from SSL or eviction side of life.
Yes.
The landlord that's upset because the tenant didn't pay rent, guys, there's like a very easy way of dealing with that situation. Let's just evict the person. Like, this can be done without any form of drama. But now we're getting the maintenance guys in, but not with the intention to do maintenance, with the intention to frustrate the tenant out of the property.
Very much can't be done.
But the problem is, if an eviction is going to cost you, say, 25,000, 30,000 Rand, maintenance and to sort the problems that were caused as a result of that out is going to cost you much more. So don't do maintenance instead of an eviction, because I know that happens very often. But true maintenance, if you really have to go in, your maintenance that you do during the subsistence of a lease is going to be basic things. You're not going to go wild. You may, but you need to give the tenant notice.
And also, if it's in the property that you rent to a tenant needs to be inhabitable. And if it gets to a point where the property is uninhabitable, the tenant might have a claim to a remission of rental for that period that they can't actually live in the property.
100%.
So then you're going to have to deal with potentially moving costs of a tenant having to leave, and it just becomes a whole fight.
And now you have to quantify your reduction of rent.
Exactly.
How much unused property did you have?
Yeah, so the argument that a landlord might make is that I'm going to lose out on rental income for the period at the end of the lease where I haven't placed my new tenant. But if you're going to try to do large-scale renovations, you're probably going to lose a remission on rental anyway. So do it at the time when it's going to be least impactful on everyone. And again, you can maintain a good relationship. So if you have a good tenant, and let's say now it's 10 years down the line and they want some maintenance to be done, then that's a person that you want to keep in and you can work with them to do it.
Yeah, definitely. I think a very important thing here is setting expectations. When you're moving the tenants in, Mr. Tenant or Mrs. Tenant will be carrying out regular inspections on the property. That might be once every 3 months, once every 6 months, and you can make a decision how often you want to do it, because you want to prevent problems. For example, in the rainy seasons, often water comes through the roof or comes through the gutter, so you want to know about it straight away and fix it Because if you don't, as a landlord, it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
Then the tenant starts getting messy, and then the tenant starts not paying rent because you haven't fixed the gutter, which would have cost you a few $100.
Yes.
And that's where
Fair enough.
Marisha Robus is great from Gauteng Property
Yeah, yeah.
Inspections. And she puts a proper maintenance schedule in place for you. So as a landlord, every year you should check things like your gutters, damp, leaks,
Yeah.
to prevent, especially in the shower and the toilet, because it just takes a few months of not repairing it, and instead of costing a few hundred,
You got a big
it's
problem.
costing you thousands. Now you need to renovate. Then it becomes a problem.
The moldy ceiling above the
it's
shower.
That's your favorite.
It's such an easy thing to fix, but if you leave it where you are going to have to replace the ceiling.
And then your
Exactly.
tenant starts bad mouthing you on the internet. You've seen it all.
And you get a bad reputation. and
Yep.
that's
Exactly.
And sorry, yeah,
No, no
Karen.
problem. I think we had a question coming
Yeah.
from Rowan. So if you
Yes.
actually want to carry on, though.
no, I could see Rowan
Yeah,
is,
Rowan,
Rowan
yes,
is
yes.
ready with
I'm
that
ready for
question.
questions. Anne-Marie Cornelius says she just wants to know how long is proper notice to do maintenance? So how long would a landlord have to give?
So it will depend on the kind of maintenance and obviously on your lease agreement. So TPN lease back lease, we say on reasonable notice. So it depends on what it is. But emergency repairs, in terms of the TPN lease back lease, we do
Yes.
allow immediate access, even without the tenant's knowledge. But now it has to be like super serious, like the neighbor says,
Like there's a
"Cook,
flood.
there's water coming out the
Yes.
front door, or there's smoke coming out a window. That means we can access the property using a locksmith, get it fixed, protect your property. We don't do that if we have to paint. That's not
Yes.
an emergency. It's
Exactly.
like, oh, fashion emergency, we need to get in here now. So it depends on notice, but I would say, depending on what it is, say it's painting, I would give somebody about a month's notice, because as the owner, you know about a month in advance, gives the person time to make a plan. If it's something like replacing a tap or whatever, 2 days notice should be sufficient. But talk to your tenant. You said that as well,
Yeah,
Andrew.
set the
It's a
expectation.
person. It's another person. Pick up the phone and have an actual human relationship. And be like, hello, Yella, I need to fix this. Can we make a plan? What would be convenient for you? Rather than just following legal requirements.
And as you say on that topic of when it comes to evictions, if you're a landlord who's maybe saying, I smelled smoke, I went into the property, locked the kit, got a locksmith, remember that you have an obligation to provide a key to your tenant as soon as reasonably possible after that
Yes.
work has been done. So you can't go in there with the excuse of, oh, I smelled smoke, and lock your tenant out. So make sure you're acting in a very compliant manner.
Have you ever heard of,
We
I believe,
occasionally
I
get a
believe
couple of
creative.
interesting questions along those
I
lines.
recently had I heard the maintenance thing again, took the front door off and said they were doing maintenance. And the advice was actually by another attorney.
You
Now,
gotta
I
be
mean,
very
we are a bunch of attorneys in this in this studio today. But I mean, we all know we have to uphold the Constitution.
Absolutely.
And Section 26 of the Constitution says we're not allowed to evict without a court order. So any funny shenanigans, even if your attorney advises you that it's illegal, and you
Again, it's
can
very
well go to jail.
Yeah, you
for a
don't.
bit.
You definitely don't want that. It's very important then that you have a also legally compliant lease. So if you are not using the TPN lease pack already, please go to shop.tpn.co.za. We have completely legislatively compliant documents, a full pack of 30-something documents, anything you could possibly need in terms of running a rental either as an agency or as an investor. So go into shop.tpn.co.za to get some of that.
And on that topic, Greg, I mean, to give the notice, Rowan, to the question, I mean, documentation, like simple notice letters, how do you give this notice? All of those things are part of the lease pack, not a specific notice to come and fix something notice.
Yeah, of
but
course.
there are all those easy communication, when to give notice, what you have to do. That's form part of the lease pack, so it's not just lease, it's actually quite wild.
And also, if you have any doubts, you have TPN. So you can get in touch with legal@tpn.co.za and ask the question. We're here to help you. If you're not sure whether I should give 5 days or 5 weeks, then you can always get in touch and ask the question. Andrew, now we're going to
Yes.
get a bit onto the topic of after the maintenance.
Yes.
So now I've done my maintenance, my property is looking absolutely incredible. I'm getting to the point now that I want to go list my property, and I want to make sure that I'm listing it at the right price.
Yes.
What sort of practical steps do you take to look at the market? What reports do you pull? How do you go about setting your actual price?
Well, TPN's reports, obviously. I need to know what kind of rents I can expect, right?
Yes.
Now, this comes down to, always comes down to what the market is prepared to pay. So as an individual, an investor, I might have my opinion of what my rental's worth and what my house is worth. That means nothing. What matters is what's actually happening in the market, what's happening next door, across the road, down the road. So take the property that you've got. For example, let's say it's a 3-bedroom property, it's 1,000 square meters. Go look at what properties have been let for which 1,000 square meters, 3-bedroom properties. Compare apples with apples. Don't go compare your 3-bedroom property with a 5-bedroom mansion down the road.
Yeah.
I personally would call 3 or 4 different letting agents and said, if I bring a property to you right now, it's 3 bedrooms, I think it's in good condition, what could you let it out for? And I'll get the opinion of a few different agents. I'll then pull a TPN report as well to see what TPN is saying about it. And based on that data, but also I don't just want to look for what properties are going to be let out for. I want to see what they've been let out for recently.
Exactly.
Because if, for example, in my mind, I've got an idea of 15,000 Rand a month, and I download the TPN reports, and TPN is saying on average for a 3-bedroom property, it ranges between 12 and 16,000. Okay, my 15 falls in that bracket. But then I go find that the last 3 properties on that road, I spoke to Rawson's, Chaz Everett, and it might be someone else, and they tell me that the last 3 lets for a 3-bedroom property were 12,000, 11,000, and 12 and a half. Now I'm thinking, okay, so maybe it's going to be more around that price. Because the problem is, when you do rent your property out and you get a very good rent and the tenants move in and they start finding out that actually they can save 2,000 or 3,000 Rand on the same
By
street,
moving next
they're
door,
going to give you notice very quickly.
Yeah.
So my attitude as an investor is, I always like renting my property out for slightly cheaper than what the market value actually is. Because with that, I get longer term tenants. Because when they do look elsewhere,
A bit more room for increases.
exactly.
Yes.
So there's room for increases, but there's also, if I do move, it's going to be more expensive.
Also, a good differentiator is that you don't just go and have a look on listing sites, as an example, because those are what people are asking for.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's not what their market is necessarily actually
Exactly.
going for.
Exactly.
So that's where the reports pull in a slightly different figure. You can look at what, if you're doing sales, what the last X number of sales in the area were. You can see what the actual prices that are obtained are, not just on a listing site, as an example, what people want for their properties, because it could be a
Yeah.
great discrepancy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a good paying tenant is anyway worth much more than a 5 or 1,000 Rand more on a rental. I've
Yes.
seen that so many times. A landlord will push just that little bit over the person's comfortable
Yes.
ability to pay rent. And I mean, obviously, I see only the bad side of rentals, and still I'm dispassionate about rentals. But
It's a very good way to ensure that you have a tenant for only 1 year and you don't have
Yes.
any longevity, because if your tenant is pushed right to the max of their outer limit of
Yeah.
what they're willing to budget, and next year you ask for a 6%
An increase.
increase, and your tenant, let's say, hasn't got an increase at work,
Yes.
now still within that budget. It's not going to...
And then a property comes up a few doors down, that's a few
Exactly.
thousand Rand cheaper, and everyone's trying to save money now. They're going to give you notice.
where you might have a tenant for slightly less, but this tenant is like a queen in the garden.
Yeah,
and
looks after your
the
property.
place looks amazing. I mean, that's worth more than just
the
actual
value.
cash in
Definitely.
into your property.
And if you have to then go and spend however much revamping your property after that tenant has moved out versus they've kept it in a wonderful condition and
Yeah.
you could theoretically re-let it straight away, you'd rather keep that tenant in to maintain your property value. in the
Exactly.
long
Because it's
run.
loss of rent, you're still paying your bond, you're still paying your rates and taxes, and you're still paying levies if applicable. So that financial cost in that 1 month is far more than an extra few thousand Rand
exactly
over a year.
exactly.
So then I'm going to put my property online. Do I walk through with my cell phone and take some shaky photographs, staging my property? Should I leave my washing out on?
She's absolutely not. Just get a professional and get a proper camera.
Yes.
Because, again, it's first impression. So if you're scrolling through Property 24 private property, and even, and you'll know this, when you look at photographs, like, oh my gosh, that looks amazing.
Yes.
And photos can be deceiving, don't get me wrong. So when you're at a property, like, that's not really. But the point from a marketing point of view is make your property make it look worth more than what it actually is. Why?
Yes.
The person subscribes, the person goes, yes, I want to come view it. Your job is to get the person to the property.
Yeah.
But remember, you've now done your curb appeal, you've done the first impression counts at the property. You get those 2 things right. And I mean, Silna, what does it cost? Like 400 or 500 Rand for a professional photographer to come out and just take professional photographs.
Exactly.
And it looks so different. Yeah,
Yes, it
but
does,
it's almost like professional photo shoots of yourself, né? If you was at a family bride and somebody says, "Oh, let's quickly take a photo of the whole family," somebody looks at you know, a little weird, one is a little too shiny. You get a professional, same family, they look gorgeous, like a magazine photo. It's same thing on property.
It's also a fine line though. Make sure you've got excellent photographs, but don't lie in those photographs.
Yes.
Because we get this query from time to time, but someone rents a property based purely on the listing, and then they arrive at the property and then there's a big fight because they don't think they're getting what they
that's true.
wanted.
Because maybe there's furniture in there,
Yeah.
and it didn't state in the advert that it's unfurnished, but they took the photos with the furniture. But again, 360 tours are so nice, to do
It is a good thing to do. And
But
if you can have an inspection, not an inspection, but a viewing beforehand, make sure you have your viewing. Make sure you know what you're getting.
When you're renting, obviously when you're buying, I won't ever suggest anybody ever buys without a professional inspector. That's my opinion. But as a tenant, even if you ask a family member to go view the property on your behalf, you know, we have WhatsApp video call. Like in 2022, we lacquer. We don't have to physically be at a place to really get a feel for it. But
and everyone has different
ideally,
tastes, so don't rely on just the family member.
Exactly. And if you sign a lease agreement, you agree that you are happy with the property. So when you get there then and you're like, actually I'm not, it's not a hotel stay which you can just cancel. You are bound to this contract now.
So you're home for a year or longer.
Exactly. And even if you can cancel in terms of Section 14 of the CPA, you're going to pay an early cancellation penalty.
Exactly.
Which is going to be 1 to potentially 3-4 months rent.
Yeah.
So don't sign a contract. There's a rule in law, term caveat subscriptor. When you sign a contract, be careful because you're going to be bound to this thing.
Exactly.
So view and put in the effort. It's not... I almost made an Airbnb and then almost a Tinder joke. I went through all the potential apps, but it's not as simple as just saying no, thank you.
It's not a short-term situation.
Exactly,
you are going to be held liable for early cancellation penalties, and it's not worth your while to, you know, when you could have spent half an hour going and looking at a property.
Exactly.
It's not worth that. Just whilst we're on some sales as well.
I was wondering if you're going to go back to Tinder or Airbnb or sales.
Avoiding those. So something that's changed a little bit is with your Property Practitioners Act is your mandatory disclosure form. So it was sort of there with sales. But when you're doing your maintenance and your renovations, it's very important that you deal with plans and do your plans properly.
Yes.
Say, for example, in your mandatory disclosure form, it says, you know, have the most up-to-date plans been submitted. If you don't do your planning submission, and you always should, who's going to bear the cost if a sale goes through and that's been ticked as yes? And
the thing is, the problem is, I'll give the less lawyer, more practical answer, and then I might lawyer him if I feel like it. But the truth of the matter is, if you're building stuff by, and there is no other term, guys, we're all in the property industry, I'm allowed to say bakkie builder. If you are building with a bakkie builder something that's not planned, you didn't draw a plan, but you're not building, like I'm in a kitchen, if you redo a kitchen, fantastic, use whoever, you don't need plans for that. But if you're building a lapa, if you're building you're just extending you're just building a little cottage. You know, you can't just build stuff without plans. And I grew up on a farm, and my dad is the king of random building. So one morning you'll rock up there and he's building. There's a bunch of guys and we're building. And in a week there are 3 new rooms. That was fine, but now even in Mpumalanga, we've all seen that with the appeal court and everything, with the Spluma certificates. And that is going to extend to the rest of the country. Even on farms, we will have to have proper plans. If you have something off plan, why is that? Is it because government wants to make money out of it? No, it's to actually keep us alive, Yella. This is why we need plans. Because certain structures cannot just hang in the air and you just hope for the best here. You will have to get the right people, an architect, a civil engineer in there to understand what we can and what we can't do. If you didn't do that, the thing is, if you have, now I'm going to scare the property practitioners, I'm sorry, you guys know I love you, most of everybody in the world, but if you took mandate and you don't have a mandatory disclosure form, and you are selling that property without the mandatory disclosure form, plans wasn't done properly, something bad happens, now suddenly you become personally responsible because of the effect of the Property Practitioners Act. Now, I don't mean to scare you, I have an answer as well. Just get a mandatory disclosure form and place the obligation on the correct person. It will have to be the seller. And in terms of your OTP, the seller must warrant that everything is on the plan. And now if that happened, now it's cool. Now it's the seller's problem. But if you didn't do that, if you didn't go through the effort as the purchaser to make sure there is a provision in the contract that places that obligation on the seller, it's going to fall squarely in your hands again. And it's a massive disaster. But the property practitioner that could run into personal liability, that's something quite important to be aware of.
And it's so easy to just fill out the mandatory disclosure form, fill out your mandate agreement, make sure that you've got the proper OTP, go to the TPN sales pack. It's all there. We've made it nice and easy for you. Avoid having that personal liability, and just make sure you've got the right documents in place.
And if something is weird, whether you're buying or you're renting, bring a special condition into your lease agreement. Say for instance, or your sale agreement. Say you view a property and you realize, oh, this doesn't seem perfectly fine, or a rental, whatever the case might be. At least just write that into your special conditions to say the parties agree that this is the one not normal thing. The seller undertakes to first do this or obtain this certificate or fix this. Or if you're a tenant and you're viewing a property and you feel like, I need this done before I can take occupation, a verbal communication isn't going to be sufficient. Have it in the special conditions. If the landlord doesn't do it, if the seller doesn't do it, you can place them on terms and you can act legally against them. So protect yourself legally as well.
Yeah, and as you say with certificates, that isn't just sales. So it does specifically state that if a tenant requests a copy of your electrical compliance certificate, you're obligated to provide it. So if you've done alterations in the property, let's say you've redone your kitchen, you've installed new plugs and all these new things, you need to go get yourself a new electrical compliance certificate, because if yours is out of date and the tenant requests it, again, you're going to run into big issues.
Or even worse, if something bad happens,
say
the
catches fire.
Exactly, and the tenant is suffering damages because you didn't do the things right. You will be personally liable.
No,
you don't want to do that.
And one thing on that, you're talking about if you just somehow go build a little cottage, right? But then you build a second cottage, then you build a third cottage. It happens, right?
Yeah.
Zoning comes into effect.
Definitely.
Yes.
Now all of a sudden you want to remortgage or get a mortgage on the property, or something goes wrong and you don't have the right zoning in place. That's
And it takes forever to get your zoning sorted sometimes. So you can't do it after the fact. You have to do it first.
Yes.
We're all South African and I love it. We do now and figure it out later. Are we going to, what's the thing? Well, don't ask.
Don't
just
ask
do it and apologize later.
Don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness.
Exactly.
It doesn't work in this situation.
In building, not that.
Because what could happen is if you build and you don't get the plans and you can't get the zoning, they can come take it down. They can come and force take it down to ground.
SSLR used to do quite a few demolition orders for a municipality who will not be named because we're not doing it anymore because they didn't pay our accounts, but be that as it may. We did quite a few demolition orders and it's exactly that. It's the guy building too close to the building line. It's fun orders, it's like an eviction order, but it's it's wild, it could happen.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much. I think this is going to bring us to the end of our formal portion of the session. We're going to move into our Q&A, and I think we have a couple of poll results as well that might be available.
Yes, we do. So about 75% of the viewers today are actually currently using TPN's lease pack and or sales pack.
Excellent.
So that is really fantastic.
To those 25% of you that aren't there, shop.tpn.co.za, have good documents in place. If you're having any difficulty with dealing with the website or anything like that, get in touch with us. We'll help you through it. We'll tell you exactly what you need to be fully compliant.
And then another poll that I had was who's watching today. So 64% were property practitioners. And then 6% was just other. So
They might be tenants who are there. So hopefully everyone there has learned a little bit of something today.
Great.
No, definitely. You guys have been
Thank you for
fantastic.
tuning in, all of you.
One of the questions that we keep getting a lot is about mold. Can I charge the tenant for mold on the ceiling? Surely it was not caused by the landlord unless he was not using the bathroom. Mold is a big problem. Who is responsible for this? I think maybe if we could just address that.
I think you need to be very careful about what exactly the cause is. So
Yeah.
if you've got a tenant who loves to take long hot showers and doesn't like opening up windows and leaves doors closed, that's something that in the long run is going to have a big effect. But if your mold is emanating from rising damp coming through your property, then it's a different cause. It could potentially be for the landlord. I don't know if you guys have anything else you want to add to that.
Well, I think that's one of those points where your entry and exit inspections are so crucial. This is why I'm a fan of actually inspection apps and proper inspection software. Something, for instance, a ceiling in a bathroom. This is our topic of the day. We could have called this entire session bathroom mold, bathroom ceiling problems. But the thing is, if you have on your entry inspection nothing about the ceiling in the bathroom, you won't be able to prove as the landlord this was caused by the tenant. Back to the fair wear and tear thing. If you have mold, the previous tenant moved out and you have a bit of mold, don't just paint with the quickest white paint you can find. Do an exactly. Use a proper antibacterial paint. Use the right things. And if it happens, then again, obviously we can't place that on the tenant. There is something, it's like when you cheese mold and you use the same bucky again for the next cheese, the next one's going to mold as well. So fix the problem. Then you won't be able to put it on the tenant. But if everything was perfectly well, everything is fine, there's proper ventilation as there should be. Now there's mold. We don't know what the tenant did there, then we can claim it from the tenant.
Absolutely.
So all ruled. Fair wear and tear, landlord.
It's very much a case-by-case basis. You need to have a look at the case-by-case and determine. And again, if you have the question, you can get in touch with us and we'll help you out with that.
And Greg, that's why it's important you do the inspections in between. There's the incoming and outgoing. But if there was nothing in day one, but there is mold in second or third month, because the tenant's allowed to have a long hot shower, aren't they? The lease doesn't say have a cold shower. And you know what, 9 times out of 10, it's ventilation.
Exactly.
Put a little ventilation fan or get those windows closed, there's ventilation coming in, and 9 times out of 10 it fixes it.
Makes a big difference. Also, just remember, if you are on the chat, please fill out the feedback form. Make sure you are getting your unverified CBD point. Make sure you're giving us ideas of what you'd like to hear about in the future, and also provide feedback. Rowan, do we have more questions?
Yes, we've got tons.
Brilliant.
And a lot about repairs, renovations. So one of the questions is, what if your tenant has done repairs without your consent? Can they deduct this from the rent?
No.
Definitely no.
Well, that was a clear answer.
Simple answer. The two attorneys looked at each other with wide eyes. No, definitely not. Anything that is going to be done by the tenant, it needs to be with landlord's written consent, not just WhatsApp where someone's not paying attention at 10 o'clock at night and they say, go do whatever. Be very careful. You can't just suddenly, at the end of the lease, have a long list of all the things that you've done to the property over the year that you haven't told the landlord about and try and claim it all back. It doesn't.
Like new kitchen, new bathroom, he wants 100,000 rand.
Exactly.
And sliding door.
And it happens. It really does. That is the scary thing. You have, someone's redone an entire kitchen and suddenly at the end of the lease they say, now you need to pay me for it. Like, well,
and that's why inspections are so important, because as a landlord you'll pick it up.
Yes, exactly.
It comes down to inspections.
Exactly. So it's a very simple no on that one.
I knew the answer, but I just thought to answer.
We'll ask you the questions next.
Yeah, to ask the question. Another one that we have is, what can one do when an owner drags their feet with authorizing or doing important maintenance? A tenant is patient up to a point.
Yeah, clause 24.
Go for it.
Clause 24 of the leaseback lease. I always say this. With all the agents I have a good relationship with, relationships with, and training that I'm doing for them, I always say, I get the question, this tenant's been nagging the landlord to do something. So then the agent will let me know. So now the tenant now said he's going to stop paying rent. And I say, no man, we can't just stop paying rent, as much as a landlord can't just lock a tenant out because he's not paying rent. A tenant can't just stop paying rent. It's not part of the potential options you have. In terms of clause 24 of the leaseback lease, we do place an obligation on, an ability on a tenant to place the landlord on terms, exactly as you would do placing a tenant on terms that doesn't pay rent. Place the landlord on terms, give him 20 business days to rectify his breach. If he doesn't, now the tenant can cancel the agreement, enforce specific performance, or funsies, utilize a remedy called exceptio non adempletic contractus, where you withhold
need to Google
performance. If you say that to somebody, they'll just be like, "Ah, okay." But that means you can then, after the notice period, say, "I am going to withhold my performance, Mr. Landlord, by not paying my rent until you perform." You can't withhold it forever or just use the rent to fix the problem yourself. You may notify the landlord of that, but give him proper notice in terms of clause 24 and make sure you follow the right steps and then choose the correct remedy. You can't tell the landlord, "I'm going to cancel," or "I'm going to enforce a specific performance," or "I'm going to withhold my performance." You have to choose the remedy you're going to enforce at that time. But that's a good time to contact a lawyer to do a letter
Also
like that.
something to add on to that with tenants. So tenants need to also remember that you're renting the property in the condition that you're seeing it. You're not necessarily renting the property in perfect condition. So it's a big difference as well between maintenance that the landlord is actually required to carry out because something's broken, something along those lines. But if you move into a property, let's say the walls are looking a little bit tired or something's there, but you accept the property in that condition, you can't then move into the property and say to the landlord, "Now you're obligated to go and do all of this." So just be very careful about what exactly you're going to be placing people on terms for. It's not a case of, everything goes all of a sudden.
And especially remember, if you're renting a property, you're not staying in a hotel. I very often get the feeling
Absolutely.
that tenants feel that they are staying in a hotel. So when the light bulb is dying, they call the landlord, "You have to come and no. Now this is a you problem now. You
Short-term
have to
consumable,
short-term
that needs to be
consumables,
replaced. Yeah.
exactly.
I think the big problem here is that 99% of tenants won't know that. Won't know that you can put your landlord on terms.
Yeah.
And if the landlord knows that the tenant can put them on terms, the landlord's not going to say to the tenant, "Put me on terms."
No, of course not.
But this is where the managing agent's going to come in.
Yes.
And also the importance of having read your contract before you've signed it.
Yes, which most people don't do.
Exactly, but
Which
is an absolute must. Needs
Which
to be
is
done.
why, luckily, we have one that the majority of the country is using.
Exactly.
So it's a pleasure.
People will get used to
Soon,
it.
everybody would have read the lease back lease at least once in their lives. So let's just hope for that moment.
So on the TPN lease is a clause 24 that states the tenant can put the landlord
on
on
terms.
On
yeah.
terms.
Exactly.
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Clause
You learn
23
something every day.
Clause 23 is
Yeah.
the landlord placing the tenant on terms. 24, tenant, landlord. Ach, my
Is that
moeder.
on all leases or just the TPN one?
That's the TPN lease from the
TPN
TPN
lease,
shop,
exactly.
yeah.
That's really
That's
cool.
If I knew all the other leases in the country's clause numbers, I would have been super impressed
Quite
with
something,
myself.
yeah.
You'll be very old by that stage.
Rowan, do we have any other questions?
Yes, we do. It's something that Andrew touched on earlier. Can either the landlord or the agent check the property every few months during the lease period?
So interim inspections, it's very important that you strike a balance. You can't rock up every week and expect to do an inspection because, again, it goes back to what Silna said, undisturbed use and enjoyment. If you're getting an interim inspection done once a month, you're being disturbed to an
Yeah.
extent. So, if you set up an interim inspection and you mention it in your lease agreement that it'll be every 4 months or every 6 months, and you've got a consensus and agreement on that in advance, then you know that it's reasonable. So reasonable for lawyers is such a fun place that you can argue. It's because, what is reasonable to someone, it might not be
Yeah.
reasonable to others. But yeah, it really is 4 to 6 months, not bad. Once a month or every couple of weeks, it shouldn't happen.
But agree to it as well in
Yeah.
writing in terms of your
Up
lease
front.
agreement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I think what I personally do is I say from day one, I'm going to come inspect in 3 months' time, and 3 months later, 6 months. Because within the first 6 months, I'm going to see if they've got pets, I'm going to see if they're looking after property. And after 6 months, after doing 2 inspections, if I found the rent's being paid and the property is being looked after, I'm not going to go 3 months later, I'll go 6 months later. Because
Exactly.
now I've got a great tenant, they're paying their rent,
Yeah.
the house is being looked after. But the first 3 months, and they never ask for pets, but now there's pets, and pets are in the house, and I can see walls. I'm going to have a conversation. I'm going to come back 3 months later, and I might do more every 3 months,
Yeah.
which hopefully I don't want to do.
Yeah.
But it's being reasonable.
You need to
Yes.
build some trust with the tenant
Yes.
or the opposite. So
Yeah.
you make sure.
Great. Then another one we have is how important is it to provide security such as extra patio push locks, safety gates, etc. in the rental market?
So these are definitely value adds, but it's all by agreement. So if you move into a property that doesn't have any of that security stuff, you can't just suddenly go and demand it from the landlord. But from an investor's side of things, it's not a.
I think it comes down to who you are, because if I've got student accommodation and I've got young girls there, I'm going to make sure there's a caretaker. I'm going to make sure there's panic alarms. I'm going to make sure there's CCTV cameras, because I don't want to be a landlord of a property. And for me personally, it's a peace of mind as an investor. Landlord, I'm going to bed that night. I want to know that I've done everything to keep my tenants safe. So if something goes wrong, or happens, or burglary, or death, at least I've done everything I can. So for me personally, I'm not talking about everyone. I want to make sure I've got the trellis door. I want to make sure that I'm doing whatever I can to look after my tenants.
And it's not a legal requirement, but I think it's similar to the gas stove thing. Would it make a tenant more comfortable to stay there? Potentially. Would that increase your rent? Likely. So
might give you the edge over that property that we're talking about just down the street.
Exactly.
If you're in an area that has had, let's say a higher rates of break-ins lately, and you've got the security, then it can definitely help you.
Definitely.
Give you the edge.
Great, so I've got a question here, and I just want to kind of watch the facial reactions on Greg and Silna's face. Can you disconnect electricity if the arrears are high on rent and electricity?
Can we do it quiet?
Should we just say no together?
No, we can. Rawi, you can count us in.
No, you definitely cannot. It is an offence. It could lead to your arrest even. Do not cut off electricity. Do not cut off water. Do not restrict water.
Can you get a court order to do that though?
Yes. Yes, court order.
Tell us about it.
But look at that. I like that. No, you can do that, but only if you can approach a court for a utility disconnection order, only in a situation where that's your last, only potential remedy.
Yeah.
So you can't approach a court for a utility disconnection order instead of an eviction.
Yeah.
But you can approach a court for a utility disconnection order if an eviction is going to take exceptionally long for some or the other reason out of the control of the applicant, like sale and execution type property where there is a dispute on the underlying right of ownership, stuff like that. You can definitely approach a court for that. Quite cost-effective application to do, so it can be done, but definitely not without a court order, because there my answer is always nobody really looks amazing in a bright orange.
No, definitely not. Yeah.
Great. Then the next one has to just do with maintenance budgets for owners and landlords. It says, what percentage of your monthly budget should you budget, and is the norm for maintenance? Profitability being key.
So that's going to depend on the type of property we're talking about. If we're talking about student accommodation property or a multi-let where there's lots of traffic, I'm going to budget at least 20% of my gross rent to go towards maintenance. And in those type of properties, think of who's cutting the lawn, who's the caretaker, who's looking after the common grounds. If there's lots of traffic, door handles breaking. So you're talking 20-25%. If I'm buying a new build property, a little one-bed flat, maybe more like 8%.
Yeah.
It's a new build, it's a new property. Never think you won't have maintenance, but then I'll probably budget 8% of the gross rent. So look at the type of property you have. How big or small is it? Is it brand new? Is it second hand? And is there one tenant? So there's one tenant using the taps, one tenant using a shower, or a multi-let with 15, 20 people.
Yeah.
You're going to have high maintenance. That's 20, even 25% of the gross rent. Yeah.
Another question we've got here. What if a tenant installed a DSTV dish and they now want to remove that at the end of the lease agreement?
Well, it is who's taking? You were ready. Yeah. Take him.
It's funny because we seem to have like the same wavelength on all of it. It's just a question of who's going to give the answer.
We would swear we know the same things in law, Greg.
Exactly. It's very, you've got to look very much at whether or not it is the fixture to the property. So if, for example, it's something that cannot be removed without causing damage to the property, you've got 4 bolted holes through the wall and there's no way that that's going to be fixed. If it's a fixture to the property, it then, in terms of the lease, becomes the property of the landlord, especially if this is something that wasn't done with the landlord's knowledge or the landlord's consent. Let's say they've moved into the property, there was a slightly rusty dish that they've now tossed out in the dump, and there's a new dish that's in there, but they haven't spoken to the landlord about it. Then, that's something that's going to eventually become the property of the landlord.
what he said.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
We have time for one more very quick question. We're coming to the end of our session.
Fantastic. Can you install prepaid meters during the term of the lease?
I don't like it.
No.
Not if the parties didn't agree to it, especially if your rent was included. If your rent was excluded, approach the tenant and ask if they're cool with it. But if the rent was included, and I've been getting that question recently, definitely not, because how are you going to calculate that? Wait until the end of the lease and install it then. If the tenant's anyway paying, have a conversation, keep it in writing,
Perfect.
and if the tenant's cool, then we can.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. This brings us to the end of the session. If for whatever reason we didn't get to your questions, please send them through to legal@tpn.co.za. If you want help getting onto the TPN shop to buy either the sales pack or the lease pack, or to access the property reports, it's at shop.tpn.co.za. Our help desk is also there to assist you. Andrew and Silma, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, guys. It was
Thank you for a
awesome,
great
eh?
session. Yeah,
Thank
we'll see you very soon. Thanks, everyone.